Chinese cuisine is known as one of the world's richest cuisines. In fact, it can be said that this richness is somewhat challenging for our stomachs. Dishes made with insects, worms, rats, dogs, and many other animal species are among the preferred dishes in Chinese cuisine. So why do the Chinese choose to eat insects, worms, and more when there are many delicious foods around the world? We might find it difficult to understand this situation, but there is a very painful story behind this preference. A tragic tale of people being forced to eat their deceased family members. Welcome to my channel called The Discovery of Mystery, where we will unveil the curtains of secrets. In the late 17th century, China's estimated population was around 130 million. Regardless of the historical period, China's population has always been larger than other countries, despite major events and wars. When we investigate the reason for this, we see that China's lands are very fertile, and the rapid increase in population is due to high food production. Having a large population has both advantages and disadvantages. With a good leader, a well-managed large population can become a significant power, but under poor governance, even a minor problem can lead the country to great destruction. As I mentioned, throughout history, the Chinese, with their consistently large population, managed to survive by governing this populous mass. This was achieved through harsh authoritarian systems where people were compelled to work like robots in challenging conditions. In these systems, farmers were subjected to very high production quotas. If a peasant failed to meet the production demanded by the Chinese government, they would either be punished or receive a reduced share. This situation led many peasants to dire straits, even causing loss of life. Consequently, farmers were forced to work in extremely difficult conditions. The Chinese government exerted immense pressure on the people. Despite this pressure, one might wonder why the population did not rebel and had to endure such hardship. At times, the Chinese people did rebel against the government, but these rebellions were often subdued, and the Chinese government continued to intensify its oppression to keep the population subdued. Now, let's fast forward to today. The Chinese population, which endured heavy oppression in the past, is in a relatively better situation. Thousands of years have passed, life has changed, technology and techniques have developed, and consequently, food production has increased and improved. In recent years, China's economy and production have placed it among the world's powerful countries. Why then do the Chinese still seem to be eating as if they are in a state of scarcity? Why are they not selective about their food and prefer dishes that push the limits of our stomachs? The answer lies in a bitter Mao-era famine they experienced in the past. Mao Zedong, who lived between 1893 and 1976, was a politician and the founder of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China. Rising to leadership during the Chinese Civil War, he established the People's Republic of China in 1949 after the Communists' victory. He continued to govern the republic until 1976. In 1958, he initiated a Great Leap Forward movement, aiming to completely abandon the old culture and create an industrialized China. While this goal sounded appealing, Mao's planned implementations turned into a nightmare for the Chinese people. Mao was an obsessive leader. Mao's obsessive goals led to the establishment of industrial cities and the creation of giant communes. People in these communes were forced to work under harsh conditions in state-controlled factories, with their payments made in food. Those unwilling to work faced heavy pressures and even death. Under Mao's rule, large agricultural communes were established, and people in these communes had to work under intense pressure, meeting demanding production quotas. The Maoist regime aimed to focus the entire population solely on industrial and food production. They sought to erase all other matters from the minds of the people under the guise of a cultural revolution. It was as if they wanted to sever the roots of the people. Imagine how profound China's historical civilization is. Mao's administration aimed to erase this deep history from the people's memory under the banner of modernization. The measures taken by Mao's regime towards this goal were staggering. Craftsmen with different pursuits, people with historical artifacts or books at home, were rounded up to labor camps without questioning, and they were forced to work in extremely harsh conditions. Craftsmen had their hands amputated. Those with allegiance to a different philosophical understanding or belief were killed. As I mentioned, China has a deep history. Temples belonging to ancient Chinese philosophy were destroyed, and old texts were collected and burned. Understanding and accepting these actions is truly challenging. Trying to detach people from their roots, wiping out thousands of years of history in an instant, what a great mental devastation. Moreover, a Chinese leader exerting pressure on their own people, their own nation, truly a tragic event. Let's review what we've discussed so far. An obsessive and oppressive government, a population forced to work under pressure and coercion, unimaginable production quotas, the destruction of cultural values, and a life devoid of hope. Isn't it an environment the human mind would find unacceptable? Did the Chinese not rebel against this? Unfortunately, no. The oppression is so severe that the Chinese people could not resist. You may wonder if this situation persisted. No, it did not. An event occurred that brought about an even greater catastrophe. What caused this destruction? It may sound interesting. The culprit behind it was sparrows. 1958. Somehow, sparrows caught Mao and his team's attention. They observed small sparrows eating fallen grains and, with a visionary deduction, believed that the sparrows, by consuming the grains, would prevent them from achieving their production targets. Then came the order that ruined everything. Kill all the sparrows. The Maoist regime issued an order to kill all the sparrows throughout the country. The people, who had turned into robots under the pressure at that time, started implementing the order without questioning. Millions of birds were slaughtered due to this order. Unfortunately, the horrifying consequences of this bird massacre would follow. Immediately after the bird slaughter, the Maoist regime was very pleased. They saw a slight increase in production. However, wherever human intervention is absent, there is a natural balance. The balance disrupted by human hands will undoubtedly lead to a greater disaster for humanity. This is exactly what happened here. Imagine, China is an agrarian society. Agriculture has many natural enemies that harm productivity. Insects, rodents, sparrows, and other birds are natural predators for these creatures. In an environment without these natural predators, insect populations increased abnormally in many regions. Subsequently, the number of rodents also began to increase. This situation began to cause significant damage to both agricultural fields and stored products. Then, a disaster ensued where people lost their humanity, ethical values, and empathy rules had to be abandoned. Mao's regime faced the grave consequences of its misguided decisions. It hurriedly attempted to import sparrows and other birds from Russia, but unfortunately, it was too late. The agricultural system had collapsed, and food production operations were severely damaged. During that time, China had a population of 800 and 900 million people. Imagine the hardships that could arise with the deepening of the food crisis, a truly terrible situation. As the food crisis deepened, Mao's regime prioritized maintaining order in cities, particularly safeguarding industrial development and operations, leaving the rural Chinese population to face the harsh realities leading to death. The regime utilized the imported food primarily to maintain order in cities, abandoning rural inhabitants to their fate. This is a crucial point. Picture any system in which people live. What matters to the administration is the continuation of the system's operation, the preservation of their own seats, and consequently, the continuation of their interests. In the eyes of the administration, people can be expendable when needed, especially those with low income levels. In this current era, we witness numerous discussions about potential food risks in the coming years. If such a period occurs, do not forget what I've said about the country's leaders. Returning to our topic, Mao's regime first targeted those in villages who couldn't meet the production quotas. They halted the food support sent to these regions. This situation, already burdensome for people barely able to feed themselves, brought about a great catastrophe. The results were truly horrifying. The people in these regions, in a desperate attempt to survive hunger, depleted all resources before succumbing to starvation. As a result, animal husbandry in rural areas also came to an end. As I mentioned earlier, China had a population of 800 to 900 million people at that time. Imagine, more than half of this population struggling with hunger in an environment where natural balance was disrupted. It was an incredibly dire situation. Of course, after a while, there were no animals left to eat. This time, in order to survive, they had to eat everything our minds and stomachs couldn't accept. Insects, grass, herbs, tree barks, soil, and mud. You can't believe that what I'm describing happened just a few decades ago, can you? To better understand the extent of the famine and suffering, I want to share the experiences of someone who lived through that period of scarcity but managed to survive. Back then, I was a little girl. There was no food left in our village. When I looked at my body, I could count all my bones. I didn't have the strength to stand. My father, who had succumbed to hunger just a few months earlier, collapsed unconscious, and people tore him apart and boiled him to eat. Witnessing such scenes had become something we were accustomed to in our village. Whenever someone died, this gruesome ritual would unfold because we had to eat the deceased to survive. Some even resorted to consuming corpses from graves. When my mother couldn't bear the hunger any longer, she closed the door of our house. She sat me down and placed a knife beside me, saying, "Eat me when I die, before others come, my daughter." I couldn't listen to her, because I was crying. Before long, my mother collapsed on the ground and died right there. It took time for me to face this reality, but I knew that people who hadn't seen my mother for a while would come to our door. I ate pieces of my mother's emaciated legs as much as I could. After a while, neighbors who couldn't find her outside broke into our house and, in front of my eyes, tore her apart and ate her. What Mao took from us wasn't just our families, he took away our humanity as well. You can find many sources today regarding the events that occurred during that period. I recommend Yang Yisheng's book Tombstone for further reading. Considering the flow and duration of my video, I may not be able to delve into some topics in detail. However, I suggest reading about this event from sources you can access to better understand the magnitude of what happened. Let's return to our main topic, the events that unfolded. Animals, grass, insects, mud, and deceased humans. They all vanished one by one. During the Great Famine characterized by these hardships, more than 60 million people lost their lives. The exact number of people who died working in the agricultural communes under harsh conditions, and those who perished in camps, prepared to erase historical and cultural values, is still unknown. In the following years, the famine issue was resolved through the ecological balance brought by sparrows and birds, and the importation of food. Mao, who continued his leadership strongly, despite the decisions that caused the deaths of so many people, faced no harm to his established party, which still governs China. Mao lived a life that could be considered beautiful until the age of 82, and he passed away due to natural reasons. Understanding that this situation is not possible for me. Unfortunately, the mindset always remains the same. As we started our video, we asked the following question. With so many delicious foods available worldwide, why do the Chinese prefer to eat insects, worms, and more? I believe what I have shared serves as an answer to the question of, why do the Chinese eat everything? Just imagine people who have experienced a famine to the extent that they had to resort to eating their own family and close friends would not easily forget such trauma. They might raise their own children to be able to eat anything if necessary to increase their chances of survival. In a way, they may want to raise their children to be stronger. This is why the Chinese might see many things that our stomachs find hard to accept as food. Over time, their cuisine and food culture shape and diversify accordingly. Looking at China today, we can still say that alarm bells are ringing in terms of food. China's current population has surpassed 1.5 billion. Due to changing conditions since 2020 and excessive demand, some issues have started to arise in the supply-demand balance in China. The large population in China is indeed critical. Especially in 2022 and 2023, regional water shortages have negatively affected crop productivity in agriculture. According to a published report, the water shortage over the past 2 years is expected to impact 900 million people in the coming years. Considering China's population is 1.5 billion, this is a significant figure. This water shortage is somewhat a problem that China has created for itself. They have experienced significant industrial growth, and we can't always say that they have pursued this growth in harmony with nature. One should not ignore the balance of nature, and should consider the potential disasters when intervening in this balance. We will see how China will be affected by this water shortage in the next few years. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned. You can support my channel by liking the videos and leaving comments. Until we meet again,